The Adult ADHD Handbook for Women. Manage overwhelm, build sustainable routines, and unlock your strengths without burnout, shame, or perfectionism. By Sophie Marston. Introduction. In 1980, a group of doctors gathered in a quiet, wood-paneled room in Washington, D.C. The air was still, and the only sound was the scratching of pens on paper. These men were there to rewrite the rules of the human mind. They were creating the third edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM-3. It was a normal afternoon for them, but for millions of girls and women around the world, those few hours of quiet work created a storm that would last for decades. They decided that a specific kind of brain, one that was restless, distracted, and impulsive, should be called attention deficit disorder. To decide what this looked like, they looked at the people who were causing the most trouble in classrooms. Those people were almost always young boys. They saw boys jumping off chairs, boys who couldn't stop talking, and boys who seemed to have a motor that never turned off. Because of those observations, the doctors wrote the rules based on hyperactive behavior. If you weren't running around the room or breaking things, you didn't fit the mold. With a few strokes of a pen, they drew a circle around a very specific group of people and left everyone else standing in the cold. This was the birth of the little boy stereotype. It was a moment of calm that led to a lifetime of confusion for the girls who didn't fit that description. The invisible struggle. While those doctors were writing their rules, millions of girls were sitting quietly in their classrooms. They weren't jumping on desks. Instead, they were staring out the window, dreaming of far-off places. They were doodling in the margins of their notebooks. They were losing their sweaters and forgetting their lunchboxes, but they were also getting good grades because they were smart enough to hide their confusion. These girls grew up to be women who feel like they are living a double life. On the outside, you might look like a high achiever. You have the degree, the job, the family, or the creative projects that everyone admires. But on the inside, you feel like you are standing behind a thick glass wall. You can see everyone else just doing things. You see them make a grocery list and actually buy the items on it. You see them fold the laundry as soon as the dryer buzzes. You see them arrive at meetings 5 minutes early, looking calm and refreshed. To you, those simple tasks feel like climbing a mountain in a snowstorm. You might spend 3 hours staring at a single email, unable to hit send. You might find yourself standing in the middle of your kitchen, surrounded by half-finished projects, wondering how you got there and what you were supposed to be doing next. This is the invisible struggle. It is the weight of being highly capable, but constantly overwhelmed. It is the feeling that you are a fraud, who is one missed deadline, or one messy closet away from total collapse. You have spent your life thinking you were just lazy, unfocused, or broken. You've been told to just buy a planner or try harder. But you have been trying harder than everyone else, just to stay at the starting line. Why your brain feels different. The truth is that you are not broken. You are not lazy, and you certainly don't lack willpower. Your brain simply operates on a different operating system than the rest of the world. Most of society is built for a farmer brain, a brain that likes routine, steady progress, and predictable rewards. But you have a hunter brain. You are wired for novelty, high stakes, and deep bursts of intense focus. We now know that ADHD in women often looks like an internal storm rather than an external one. Instead of running around a room, your thoughts are running around your head at 100 miles per hour. This leads to something called functional collapse. You are functioning, you are getting the big things done, but you are doing it at a massive cost to your health and your happiness. You are using perfectionism as a shield to hide the fact that you feel out of control. This book is here to tell you that the glass wall can be moved. You don't have to break it, and you don't have to try to climb over it using the same tools as everyone else. You need a custom set of instructions that honor how your brain actually works. We are going to move away from the shame spiral and towards something much more powerful, self-advocacy. A promise of transformation. By the time you finish these pages, the way you see yourself will change. You will stop looking at your messy desk as a sign of a failed life, and start seeing it as a sign of a busy, creative mind that needs a better system. You will learn how to understand the internal battery and how to stop draining it on things that don't matter. Navigate the hormonal roller coaster that makes your symptoms feel worse at certain times of the month. Build routines that actually stick even on your worst days by using rhythms instead of rigid schedules. Silence the inner critic that tells you that you aren't enough because you struggle with small tasks. Turn your hyperfocus from a random accident into a tool you can use to excel in your career and your hobbies. You are going to move from a state of constant masking, pretending to be someone you're not, to a state of sustainable brilliance. You will become a woman who knows her own strengths and isn't afraid to ask for the environment she needs to thrive. This isn't about fixing you. It's about finally giving you the keys to the Ferrari brain you've been trying to drive with bicycle brakes. Meet Maya. To see what this looks like in the real world, we need to look at Maya Chen. Maya is 34 years old and lives in Seattle. She is a senior graphic designer and a project lead at a busy firm. She's the kind of woman people describe as brilliant but scattered. She has a husband, David, and a 5-year-old daughter named Leo. It is 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. The house is finally quiet. Leo is asleep upstairs, and David is in bed. Maya is standing in her kitchen, bathed in the blue light of the microwave clock. She is staring at a mountain of unopened mail on the kitchen island. There are bills, school forms for Leo, and a wedding invitation she was supposed to RSVP to 3 weeks ago. Maya is exhausted, but her mind is buzzing. She spent the last 4 hours catching up on work because she spent most of the actual workday staring at her computer screen in a state of paralysis. She feels a deep, cold sense of failure. She looks at the mail and feels like she might cry. Why is this so hard? Why can't she just open an envelope? She reaches out and moves a pile of papers, and she finds something tucked at the bottom, her old school report card from the 3rd grade. She opens it and sees a comment from her teacher. Maya is a joy to have in class. She's a very bright girl, but she needs to stop daydreaming and just apply herself more. Maya feels a lump in her throat. She has been applying herself for 30 years. She has been trying so hard that she is on the edge of burnout, yet she still feels like that 3rd grader who can't quite get it right. She feels like she is one mistake away from her whole life falling apart. Maya's story is the story of millions of women. She is capable, she is kind, and she is incredibly smart. But she is fighting a war with her own environment every single day. Throughout this book, we are going to follow Maya as she learns that she doesn't need to apply herself more. She needs to apply herself differently. The journey ahead. We are going to explore the history of women like Emma Goldman, who was called unruly because her sensory world was too intense. We will look at Zelda Fitzgerald, who was labeled unstable because no one understood the link between her moods and her hormones. And we will learn from Hedy Lamarr, who used her ADHD trait of hobby hopping to invent the technology that makes our modern world possible. We will break down the science of dopamine and executive function so you can finally understand why your motivation feels so unpredictable. We will look at the sensory world, why the hum of the world feels so loud to you, and how to create sensory sovereignty. The mask, how to stop the exhausting performance of acting normal and start being authentic. The executive function gap, practical ways to externalize your brain so you don't have to rely on a memory that feels like a sieve. The emotional tax, how to handle the emotional sunburn of rejection-sensitive dysphoria. The power of hyperfocus, how to enter the flow state on purpose, and more importantly, how to get out of it when you need to. The path from shame to strength isn't a straight line. There will be days when the mail still piles up, and days when you forget why you walked into a room. But the difference is that you will no longer hate yourself for it. You will have a map. You will have a community. And you will have the tools to build a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. Your brain is a different kind of beautiful. It is fast, it is non-linear, and it is capable of seeing connections that others miss. It is time to stop apologizing for how you are built. It is time to start living. The quiet room in Washington, D.C. might have left you out of the conversation 40 years ago, but that conversation is changing. You are no longer invisible. You are seen, you are understood, and you are ready to reclaim your narrative. Let's begin. Chapter 1: Why does the world feel too loud? In the winter of 1882, a 13-year-old girl named Emma Goldman walked through the streets of St. Petersburg, Russia. To a stranger, she looked like any other teenager in a heavy wool coat. But inside her head, the world was screaming. The St. Petersburg markets were a nightmare of noise. Merchants shouted about fresh fish and thick furs. Horses' hooves clattered against the frozen cobblestones with a sound like hammers hitting bone. The smells were just as loud: the sharp scent of vinegar, the oily tang of smoked fish, and the heavy sweet rot of cabbage. Most people walked through these markets and barely noticed the chaos. They could tune it out. They could focus on their shopping lists or the person walking next to them. Emma could not. To her, every sound was a physical blow. Every smell was a hand grabbing her by the throat. When she got home to her family's apartment, the silence was just as bad. It felt heavy and thick, like she was buried under a pile of wool blankets. Emma's father, Abraham, did not understand his daughter. He saw a girl who was unruly. He saw a child who would suddenly burst into tears or snap at her siblings for no reason. When the house got too loud, Emma would cover her ears and scream. When the seams of her clothes felt scratchy, she would rip them apart in a fit of rage. To her father, this was a character flaw. He thought she was being difficult on purpose. He used harsh words and even harsher punishments to try to break her of these habits. He wanted a quiet, obedient daughter who moved through the world without making a scene. Emma wasn't trying to be difficult. She was simply a girl with a brain that had no volume knob. She felt everything with a level of intensity that her parents couldn't imagine. Her unruliness was actually a survival reflex. She was a pioneer of a different kind of human experience, though she didn't know it yet. She was living in a world that was dialed up to 11, while everyone else seemed to be hearing it at a 4. The filter that isn't there. Most people are born with a gatekeeper in their brain. This gatekeeper lives in a spot called the thalamus. Its job is to sit at the door of your mind and decide which pieces of information get to come inside. When a typical person walks into a coffee shop, their gatekeeper does a lot of work. It hears the hum of the refrigerator and says, "That's not important, ignore it." It feels the tag on the back of their shirt and says, "We already know the shirt is there, stop thinking about it." It sees the 20 different posters on the wall and says, "Just look at the menu." This allows the person to walk up to the counter and order a latte without feeling like their head is going to explode. If you have an ADHD brain, your gatekeeper is often asleep on the job. Or maybe the gatekeeper isn't there at all. Instead of picking and choosing what information is important, your brain lets everything in at once. This is called bottom-up processing. In a top-down brain, your goals decide what you notice. If your goal is to buy milk, you notice the milk. In a bottom-up brain, the environment decides what you notice. You notice the flickering light bulb. You notice the person 3 aisles over who is wearing too much perfume. You notice the hum of the freezer case. By the time you actually reach the milk, your brain has already processed 10,000 pieces of useless data. You are exhausted before you have even started your day. This is why the world feels too loud. It isn't just about sound, it's about the sheer amount of input your brain is trying to handle. When your brain is constantly bombarded, it stays in a state of high alert. You are always looking for the next attack, whether that attack is a loud siren or a scratchy pair of leggings. This leads to what many women call the glass wall. The glass wall is that feeling of being separated from the rest of the world. You can see everyone else just doing things. You see them grocery shopping, chatting at parties, or working in open offices. They look calm. They look like they belong. You are on the other side of the glass, feeling the vibration of every sound and the glare of every light. You want to join them, but the sensory weight of the room makes it feel impossible to move. The volume control framework. To manage this, we have to stop trying to tough it out. Emma Goldman spent years being punished for her sensitivity, but it didn't make her less sensitive. It just made her more angry. If your brain doesn't have a built-in volume knob, you have to build one outside of your body. We can do this using a system called the Volume Control Framework. This framework has 3 parts: identify, accommodate, and advocate. Identify the spikes. You can't fix a problem if you don't know exactly what it is. Often we just feel cranky or tired. But if you look closer, you might realize you are actually reacting to a spike in sensory input. Is it the way the floorboard creaks? Is it the specific blue light of your computer screen? Is it the fact that your socks have a thick seam at the toes? Accommodate the need. Once you find the spike, you stop fighting it. If the lights are too bright, you wear sunglasses indoors. If the office is too loud, you use noise-canceling headphones. These aren't cheating. They are tools that help your gatekeeper do its job. Advocate for the environment. This is the hardest part for many women. It means telling the people around you what you need. It means saying, "I can't talk while the TV is on," or "I need to move to a different table because the smell of the kitchen is making it hard for me to think." When Emma Goldman finally left her father's house and moved to America, she started to find her own sensory sovereignty. She realized that she didn't have to live in a world that hurt. She began to seek out spaces where her intensity was an asset, not a flaw. She turned her unruliness into a powerful voice for change. But first, she had to stop believing that her sensitivity was a mistake. Maya and the supermarket shuffle. Maya Chen stood in the entrance of the Fresh and Low grocery store, clutching a crumpled list in her hand. It was 5:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. This was her first mistake. The store was packed. Above her, the fluorescent lights hummed with a high-pitched buzz that felt like a needle pressing against her forehead. To her left, the automatic doors hissed open and shut every few seconds. To her right, a display of rotisserie chickens filled the air with a thick, greasy smell that made her stomach flip. Maya needed 5 things: milk, bread, eggs, apples, and chicken. It should have taken 10 minutes. She started toward the produce section. A man with a squeaky shopping cart cut in front of her. Squeak. 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 Maya felt her heart rate climb. She tried to look at the apples, but there were 12 different kinds. The signs were bright red and yellow, shouting prices at her. She stood there frozen. What kind of apples did Leo like? The green ones? No, the red ones with the spots. Or were those the ones that were too mushy? A store announcement blared over the speakers. Clean up in aisle 4. Clean up in aisle 4. The sound was so loud, it felt like it was inside her chest. Maya dropped her list. She reached down to pick it up, and her purse slid off her shoulder, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. Suddenly, she couldn't breathe. The store felt like it was shrinking. The glass wall was there, thick and cold. She saw a woman nearby calmly picking out oranges, while her toddler sat quietly in the cart. Why can't I do this? Maya thought. It's just grocery shopping. I'm a senior project lead. I manage million-dollar budgets. Why am I losing my mind over apples? The shame hit her harder than the noise. She felt like a fraud. She felt like if anyone saw her right now, they would know she was broken. Maya didn't buy the apples. She didn't buy the milk or the eggs. She left her half-full cart right there in the middle of the aisle and walked out the door. She didn't stop until she was inside her car. She slammed the door and sat in the dark. The silence was like a cool glass of water. She gripped the steering wheel and waited for her heart to stop racing. It took 20 minutes before she felt like she could turn the key in the ignition. As she sat there, she remembered something she had read. It said that for an ADHD brain, sensory overload isn't a choice, it's a biological system failure. Her brain had simply run out of space to put all the noise and light. It wasn't that she was bad at shopping. It was that she had been trying to run a marathon while wearing a lead suit. The cost of the lead suit. Many women spend their entire lives wearing that lead suit. They think that if they just try harder, they will eventually get used to the weight. They think that if they mask their discomfort, it will go away. Masking is what we do when we pretend the world doesn't hurt us. It's when you smile at a party while the loud music makes you want to hide in the bathroom. It's when you sit perfectly still in a meeting while your itchy sweater makes you want to crawl out of your skin. The problem with masking is that it uses up all your energy. Think of your brain like a battery. Most people start their day with 100%. They use 10% on work, 10% on family, and 10% on chores. By the end of the day, they still have plenty left. An ADHD woman uses 50% of her battery just trying to ignore the noise of the world. By the time she sits down to do her actual work, her battery is already half empty. By the time she gets home to her family, she is in red alert mode. This is why you might find yourself snapping at your partner or crying over a dropped spoon at 7 p.m. It's not because you are an angry person. It's because you have been processing at maximum capacity for 12 hours straight. Taking back your space. If we want to break the cycle of burnout and shame, we have to start practicing sensory sovereignty. This means you are the ruler of your own senses. You get to decide what is too much. You stop apologizing for the way your brain works. You can start small. You don't have to quit your job or move to a cabin in the woods, unless you want to. You just have to start making your environment work for you instead of against you. The 3 T's check. Several times a day, check in with your body. Look for the 3 T's, tags, temperature, and tones. Is there a tag scratching you? Is the room too hot or too cold? Is there a constant tone or hum in the background? Fix what you can. Cut the tag. Open a window. Put on white noise. Low stimulation evenings. After a long day of bottom-up processing, your brain needs a chance to reset. Create a sensory cave. Dim the lights. Turn off the TV. Wear the softest clothes you own. Give your gatekeeper a chance to finally go to sleep. The exit strategy. Before you go into a high-sensory environment like a wedding or a mall, give yourself permission to leave. Tell yourself, I will stay for 30 minutes, and if I feel overwhelmed, I am allowed to go sit in the car. Knowing you have an escape route often makes the environment feel less threatening. Emma Goldman eventually found that when she wasn't being bombarded by the screaming world, her mind was her greatest strength. She could see patterns others missed. She could feel the emotions of a crowd and speak directly to their hearts. Her sensitivity was the very thing that made her a leader. Maya Chen sat in her car and took a deep breath. She wasn't ready to go back into the store. But for the first time, she didn't call herself lazy. She realized that she had been fighting a battle that no one else could see. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to her husband, David. Hey, the store was a total sensory nightmare today. I'm heading home. Can we do breakfast for dinner with what's in the pantry? I need some quiet time. David texted back a few seconds later. No problem. I'll make pancakes. See you soon? Maya felt a tiny bit of the weight lift. She wasn't fixed yet, and the world was still going to be loud tomorrow. But she was starting to realize that she didn't have to shatter the glass wall. She just had to learn how to live on her own side of it. She put the car in gear and drove home, leaving the fresh and low and its buzzing lights behind. She still didn't have the eggs, but she had something much more important, a little bit of her own battery left for the people she loved. The journey was just beginning, and the road would be bumpy. But Maya was no longer walking it in a lead suit. She was learning to listen to her own rhythm, even when the rest of the world was out of tune. Chapter 2: The Mask, Living Two Lives at Once. In the early 1920s, everyone in New York City knew exactly who Zelda Fitzgerald was. She was the first American flapper. To the public, she was the girl who jumped into fountains, danced until dawn, and always had a clever thing to say. She was the bright, shining star of the jazz age. People thought she was just a wild spirit who loved to party. They saw her bobbed hair and her short skirts, and thought she was the picture of a woman who didn't have a care in the world. They believed her life was as easy and bubbly as the champagne she drank. The truth was much heavier. Behind the scenes in Paris and New York, Zelda was running herself ragged, trying to be the person everyone expected her to be. Her letters from those years show a woman who felt like her mind was a tangle of yarn she couldn't quite straighten out. She struggled to keep her thoughts in a line. She felt a constant, restless energy that made it hard to sit still or focus on one thing for long. To stay in the spotlight, she had to act. She had to pretend she was perfectly in control of her wit and her style, even when her brain felt like it was spinning out of gear. This performance is what we now call masking. It is the act of hiding your true self to fit into a world that doesn't quite make sense to your brain. Zelda was a master at it, but it cost her everything. By 1930, the strain of playing the perfect socialite while her internal world was in chaos led to a total breakdown. She had spent a decade pretending she was normal by society's standards, and she simply ran out of energy to keep the mask up. The myth of the lazy woman. There is a common belief that women with ADHD are just a little spacey, or perhaps just need a better planner. Society tells us that if a woman is failing to keep her house clean or her work organized, she is simply not trying hard enough. We are told that real ADHD looks like a young boy jumping off a desk. Because many women don't do that, people assume we don't have it. We are taught to believe that if we can act like everyone else for a few hours at a party or a meeting, then we must be fine. But this is a lie. The reason many women go undiagnosed for decades is that they are world-class actors. From a very young age, girls are taught to be helpers, to be quiet, and to be easy. When our brains feel loud or messy, we learn to hide it. We look at the glass wall, that invisible barrier between us and the people who seem to just do things easily, and we decide to fake it. We copy how other people talk, how they dress, and how they organize their desks. We spend every ounce of our brainpower trying to look like we aren't struggling. This isn't politeness. It is a survival strategy. It's like trying to run a marathon while holding your breath. You might keep up with the pack for a while, but eventually your lungs are going to scream for air. For an ADHD woman, that scream often looks like a sudden, deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. Maya's great performance. Maya Chen stood at the front of the conference room at her design firm in Seattle. Her hair was pulled back into a perfect, sleek bun. Her blazer was crisp. On the big screen behind her, a project plan was laid out in beautiful, neat boxes. Her boss and the clients were nodding. One of them leaned over and whispered, "I love how meticulous you are, Maya. You never miss a detail." Maya smiled and thanked them. She looked like the most organized person in the room. But inside, her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she thought they might hear it. She felt like a total fraud. What they didn't see was the last 48 hours. Maya had actually forgotten about the deadline until 2 days ago. When she realized her mistake, a wave of cold panic had washed over her. To fix it, she had stayed up until 3 a.m. 2 nights in a row. She hadn't eaten a real meal, she had lived on cold coffee and handfuls of cereal. She had used hyperfocus, that ADHD superpower that kicks in when the stakes are high, to build the entire presentation in a blur of frantic energy. She was masking her forgetfulness with meticulous work. She was hiding her chaos behind a wall of perfection. As the meeting ended and people started leaving, Maya felt a familiar dark weight settling in her chest. She wasn't happy about the successful presentation. She was just relieved she hadn't been caught. She felt like she was one missed email away from everyone realizing she was actually a mess. Instead of feeling proud, she felt like she needed to hide in a dark room for a week. She had used up all her battery for the month just to survive one Tuesday afternoon. The high price of the mask. When we mask, we are using a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex to do things that